I never learned along the way when something was too much. I'd constantly, throughout my life, been pushed beyond capacity and done it. Most of my life has been that. I have just been thrust to the next level and I have been able to swim. This was the first time I felt like I was barely doggy paddling and keeping up. I could see myself and was like, okay, girls, we are falling to pieces. But no one else could see that. The mask that I had created was like Teflon. Came back from Costa Rica on the plane. The pilot was like, we're descending into Atlanta. And it felt like a weight got placed on my chest as soon as he said that. And as we descended, it felt like it got heavier and heavier. I was on a flight with two of my friends, and I think I said to them, and then I texted them and said, I'm going to quit.
Let's talk a little bit about where you were when we first met.
Oh my goodness. So when Kristen and I first met, it was right at the beginning of being a part of a leadership fellowship focused on people of color who wanted to ascend to executive leadership in college access organizations. And so Kristen met me at a place where everything about me was about how to get to the next level. Like she met me I am ambitious Black woman on the rise, and I want to get to the top. So I was a senior director in a college access organization, and I had my eyes set on becoming a chief program officer and eventually becoming the CEO of that organization. I think I even wrote that in my essay, one of the essay questions asked about where we wanted to be. With my mindset on becoming a university president at a HBCU one day. If you had talked to me in my life, I'd have been saying the same thing. If you had talked to me about dating and relationships, I would have been saying, hey, I need a man who understands that I am ambitious and I'm headed to the top. No, why did I want to be at the top? I don't know, because it was just naturally the next step to advance to. And most of my life had been about moving up and advancing to the next step. And so I was a senior director. So then the next step was my supervisor's job, right? My manager's job, which was the chief program officer. What also, though, was underneath all of that was I was barely holding on by a thread in terms of my personal energy. I was exhausted. This was 2022, right? The beginning of, yes, 2022. And so having worked in college access, anyone who worked around education, we worked through the pandemic, and it was some of the hardest times of most of our lives collectively, trying to stay connected to students, trying to continue to do our work during a time where sometimes we couldn't even find students. They weren't coming to school. There was a lot of disorganization. There was a lot of stress. And during that time, I'd moved to being completely at home. I worked for a national nonprofit. We were virtual, but we used to go out into the community, into schools all the time. There was personal connection. I was single. So this now meant being at home all the time, being at home by myself all the time, and then being on the computer all the time. And while I was doing that, I didn't realize what it was taking away from me because I was focused on the goal. So coming out of that, I started getting back into some parts of myself, the ambitious parts of myself. Okay, what's the next thing we're going to do? And that's where Kristen met me, both holding the stress of all that had happened between in 2020 to 2021, but also ready to turn the page to a new thing without dealing with any of that. And what was going to help me move forward was moving forward. Or at least that's what I thought. So that's where I met Kristen, online with our fellowship cohort, ready to talk about being a leader, and how I'm going to get to that next level. So that's where you met me. I'm interested in your impression of me. I don't know if you could see that on me or if I masked it well. I felt like I masked it well, but I'm not.
Well, you did to a certain point. You came across like that. And then what happened was there was a point. So you had made it to chief program officer, right? So you made it there. And that is around the time when I started seeing you show up differently. And so I started seeing you show up as something is up. Something is up,
Yeah.
right? And so, of course, the first thing you think about is like, okay, is it me? Is it the program? Like, what's going on? What's happening? So you have to kind of start peeling back the layers to see what is this about? And so that's when we started doing, part of the program was doing individual coaching sessions. And on the individual coaching sessions, that's when you can really see what's going on with people. So I think you try to hide a lot of it, probably from yourself, from everybody. Like, so let's talk about that. What did that feel like for you with this something started with the bubbling that we saw it. Like, well, I saw
Yeah.
it, right?
So I think the interesting thing is this is maybe like a month and a half, 2 months into the fellowship. So we start in January. We're now in February, and I have an opportunity to move into the chief program officer role. Fate, right? Also, as somebody that grew up in church and religion was a big part of my life, I am like, oh, this is God and this opportunity. This is what I have said I wanted. It came a lot faster than I thought. I have the opportunity. That is what this is for. That is the story that I'm telling myself. This opportunity was made for me. I go after it. I get it. I am now a chief program officer. So I am now living into the thing that I said I wanted loudly to everyone around me. This is what I wanted. Kristen, this is what I wanted in my essay. I now have it, and now I am terrified in some ways. I advanced so quickly. And most of my life has been that. I have just been thrust to the next level and I have been able to swim. This was the first time I felt like I was barely doggy paddling and keeping up. And that is because I was thrust into an organization and into a role while the organization was not doing very well. And I didn't know that in advance. I also had shifts at work where I had a really supportive colleagues that I worked with who were no longer, we were no longer a team working together anymore. I'm now immediately thrust into the C-suite with folks I never had a close relationship with because I'd spent so much time at the senior director level. And so I didn't have the collegial support because I just didn't have enough time to build it. But I was thrust directly in something that was a really challenging environment. But also, I wanted to be so committed to our program. I wanted to be so committed to the fellowship because I was like, this is how I'm going to learn how to do my job. This is
Right.
how I'm going to be able to be effective. And then in many ways, I started that program feeling so confident. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I am drowning. But who I am is confident to all these people who I just met, right? To Kristen, to all of the other folks in my cohort, they know me to be have it together, to be whatever. I'd only known everybody for 8 weeks max, but like that is what I felt like. So there was me wanting to show up and still trying to make the commitment of our fellowship, which was about half days, if I remember correctly. It was like 3 or 4 hour sessions. While so much of the world in my organization was falling apart. So I was often running from terrible meetings or finding out terrible news to jumping into our sessions, wanting to be really present with everyone, hearing things, learning things in our session from you that I was like, oh my God, I am dealing with this right now. Oh no.
Yeah. So when we did our case study and we talked about an organization, JC Penney, we talked about an organization and talked about change management and toxic leadership and all of that, you know, so you had this aha moment where you're like, oh my God, here I am.
Reading it and I'm like, I mean, and I work in nonprofit. I'm not thinking there are going to be as many parallels. I remember you assigning it to us and me kind of being like, my background is in business. I worked as a consultant in a former life. But this is going to be connected. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, that was created for me is what I felt like. But while I am reading it, I am like, oh my goodness, I wish I'd read this 1 month prior. Maybe I would have made different choices. And I remember it was that, and there was another assignment that was like a reading of, we were talking about how to negotiate, I think, when you are new in a role and what it is like, what often we need to ask for when we're coming into senior leadership in some of these roles. And I can't remember exactly what was the reading, but it really talked about things we should be negotiating and asking for to set on the front end of taking on these roles. Well, that came a little too late too. So once I read it, I should have done all of this. I'm so eager. I was so eager for what felt like the honor of moving up, um, and being selected to move up, and people having the confidence in me to move up, that I didn't think about what I needed to be successful at all. I didn't think about that at all. That was the last thing I thought about. I was like, oh my gosh, they think I'm ready. This is what I want to do. Yes, I want to be able to do it and live into it really well.
Yeah, and so I think that's one of the things with that program and with anybody that I'm working with in coaching is there are times where when you think about relationships, it's like, ooh, 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 they chose me. They chose me. I'm in a relationship, right? But we never stop to think about whether or not we want this, right? And that's something that's very important to me for everyone is to really take the time to say, okay, yes, you want to move into the C-suite. You want to be an executive, but do you want the title or do you want this role? And what does that feel like? What does it look like? Like, what is it exactly? Like, is it aligned with who you are? And so let's go back and talk about, let me ask this question. As a hard worker or high achiever, we are always rewarded, right? Throughout our childhood, we're always rewarded by doing well, right? So we do well. And then what do we receive? What are the accolades that we receive because of it? So let's go back and talk about your earliest memories about doing well in school. Like, what did that get you? What did it make you feel?
Okay, so when I think about myself as a child, I always describe myself as little brown and round. I was a little brown, round girl from probably about kindergarten or so. Um, I was an early talker, and I had lots of opinions. My mother does share that quite often. Like, I had lots of opinion. I wasn't super sassy, but I definitely had opinions, and I remember getting a lot of positive feedback for that. Like, I remember, I would say things and people were like, like I was always, getting support and like warm rain from people, family, school, friends, because I always seemed to just like have a lot of common sense as a young person. I often was someone who colored in the lines and followed the rules. And I was naturally gifted in some ways, like in terms of schooling. Now, I still don't ever think of myself as like somebody who was like gifted, like they were like super smart. Like I have friends who I feel like, oh yes, smart. Like that is what they led with to me. I felt like I read well. I picked up on context clues well, and I was maybe smarter than the average, but not like a genius to any in any sense of the word. But I did well in school. And because I did well in school, I remember my parents and my grandmother would pay for grades. And so I got for A's, I got $5, and that was a lot of money back then to get $5. But I also remember constantly being the teacher's pet without trying. I was always one of my teacher's favorite students. Even if I didn't so much care for the teacher. I was often, because I colored in the lines, I followed directions, I wasn't disruptive. I was also in an environment that was where our schools had busing, and so there were very few students of color at all in any of our classes. And so I was often looked at as like the model little Black girl. Now I recognize that that's what that was. At the time, I just recognized I followed directions. I was a good person, and I got selected for things, and I got on the teacher's list, or I got the extra sticker, or I was the teacher's helper. And to me, it didn't feel like I was doing a lot to get. Now I recognize how much like conformity and like I understand all of those things today in a different space. But I felt like I was being myself, but I also recognized that I was getting rewarded for those things, which made me lean in deeper to being myself at the time, which was to me just people pleasing. Like today I can look at that and go, oh, I got something out of being told, she is great. She's awesome. She's a leader. Like hearing my teacher say that to my mom, hearing my mom say that about me to other people. I don't have any problem with Yarbrah. Like that is something I remember even before I started school, my mother would constantly say, like as a child in the crib, my mom would say, you know, she never really cried for anything. Like if she cried, she was hungry or she needed to be changed. And because she was that way, I could take her to church. Because she was that way, other people wanted to keep her all of the time. You know, she was like, I just had she has been no problem for me at all. And I don't, I didn't know until I think later in my life that how much of that I took in to not
Yeah.
be a problem.
Yeah, and we call that being the easy child, right? And so a
Yeah.
lot of times, especially if you're talking about being the easy child when you have siblings, right? Um, it's like there is something about being the easy child that gives you all of these kudos. However, let's talk about the drawbacks. So when you think about that, when you're being rewarded for being, hardworking and easy, and you do what you're told, and you just achieve, and there's no stress with you, right? Let's talk about the impact on you internally and physically.
Yeah. I think about that all the time because I'm like, I see my sister as a mother. So when you're talking about siblings, absolutely that is. My little sister was a crier. And she was clingy and she didn't like anyone except my parents. So she didn't go anywhere and I did, right? Because people would want to keep me. Sister didn't like anyone. And she was extremely shy in school to the point where if she got called on, she cried. She'd run out of the classroom. Like she just had a very different way of being than I was. And so we were constantly compared, right? Well, Yarbrah will go out and do X, Y, and Z. Like, why won't you do it? Yarbrah will do the Easter speech at church. My sister would get up there and she would stand up with a mic. And then I would learn her Easter speeches. There were times when I would learn her Easter speech to go and do it with her. And so one that started shaping me as like protector in some ways of my sister, which made me feel like I needed to be stronger anyway. But also hearing Yarbrah will be fine. We have no problem with her, made me feel like I needed to handle things on my own. So when things would happen to me in school, I rarely ever flag them as something to share with my parents. I don't have experiences of trying to share and being like hushed in any way. What I had experiences of is just never sharing and trying to figure it out in my 10-year-old mind about, things that were happening with me and other girls in school or being teased about my weight or whatever the situations might have been. I remember dance for me because I think eventually we'll talk about what brings us joy. As a little girl, I used to dance. I was in tap and ballet, like a lot of parents put their children in tap and ballet. Now I remember I called myself a little brown round child. Didn't really think about that much until I got closer to like fifth grade. Your bodies start to change. And also by that point in dance, we started there's some differentiation in your classes. You were kind of in general kind of tap, ballet, jazz stuff. And then you start shifting into, well, who will do ballet? And there's definitely a body type with what that looks like. Who's
Right.
going to do tap or jazz or these kinds of things? And I remember moving up to a class because my mom was very much like, you should try it all and kind of figure out what you like. That was her perspective. But I remember dressing up. This is such a vivid memory. Dressing up for dance class for ballet. And it was like the first time I noticed the difference in my body. Now I look back at myself and I'm like, well, I wasn't that big, but I was so much bigger than everyone else to me because everyone else was just like very, very skinny kids, like, which is like the stereotypical size for ballet. And I remember noticing that difference and almost immediately being like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, please. And
Yeah.
I left dance. Now, my mother, maybe she explored it. I don't remember that. But I remember I didn't ask any questions about that. I don't recall saying to my mom where my body looked different. Like maybe I didn't ask any questions. I internalized that I am too big to do this thing. And now that I can connect that to things later in my life, what it translated into me, not just with dance, but with so many other things, was that I could be um my body could make me ineligible for some things, but like me being a leader or smart could not, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't do dance, but what I shifted into was doubling down in leadership kinds of things, right? And similarly, sports. Sports was something my best friend played, was into soccer. She was amazing. Her mom would try to get like, you should come and do soccer with us. And I was like, absolutely cannot run. I am not asked. And somewhere along the way, I made the decision that I won't do things if I'm not going to be great at them.
Oh my goodness. So, whew, okay. So let me pause in here because that was definitely me for softball. And see, I was a soccer player. I was always really good in soccer. And then I got to softball. Now I could catch anything in the outfield, but I couldn't hit. And so I was one of the worst players on, it was me and my friend Joy. We were one of the worst players on the softball team. And this might have been seventh, eighth grade. And I remember just like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And so there is a part of us for being hard workers and high achievers where it's like, if we can't be the best at it, we just don't want to do it. And there is a severe danger in that where in trying something new, you got to start. You got to start at the bottom. And this also transfers itself into wanting to go to a new job where you go from knowing everything and oh, Yarbrah can do it all to then you go to a job where you don't know anybody and you're learning skills and things like that. So that can definitely impair us as well. So
That's so right. And not just I want to be great at it. I want to be great at it fast.
yes.
Like
Yes.
I don't know where I got that from, to be completely honest. Like why I needed to be good really fast. I didn't have to be good just like immediately, but I needed to see I have potential to be great, and I can see my progress really quickly. Or for me, it didn't stop being worth my time. I would say to myself, okay, God has given everyone gifts. Now this is what happened. This is why children need to talk to parents. Older. Again, I was counseling myself with the brain that I had and whatever period of time that was. And so I would say to myself, okay, well, God has given us all gifts. This is clearly not mine. So my friend, her gift is this soccer thing. She is gifted to run. I'm going to let her have that. I'm going to support her and watch her games. But me, I can't run. So what is the purpose of me being out there anyway? What, you know, um, what I am is student government. What I am good at is running for office and being a leader in this way. What I am good at is being in my honors classes and getting these A's because I do that effortlessly. So clearly, that is the path I'm supposed to be going on. That is
Yeah.
people give me accolades. That's where I get the gold stars. That's where I get the certificates and the trophies. So you do your sports, whatever, I'll do this. My sister was a cheerleader. I wanted to cheer. My mother would always ask me that I want to do that, but I was like, I am too large for this uniform in my mind, and I could not jump well immediately. I'm not getting out there to have to learn how to do that in real time for everyone to see. Instead, I'll support my sister doing that, and I will be the president of whatever club or organization or I will be the speaker at this event because I speak well and that is what others say. And so that is what I will do.
Yeah, and that is a huge thing, with a lot of the people that I work with, where if you can't do it quickly and you're not the best at it, then you don't wanna do it, right? So, yeah, and there's a part of that is like, we don't ever want to feel, number 1, less than, and number 2, different, right? Because the difference is, oh, we're the best at this, leadership or whatever, so that makes us feel really good, but the feelings that we have when we are, let's say, struggling are just things that we don't want to get in touch with, right? So let's go back. Actually, we should say go forward, into, let's talk about when I began to see things a little differently, where how you appeared on screen, right? Um, what was the internal struggle going on within you as a hard worker?
Well, it was that I don't think I ever took the time to say what is going on in my organization is is too much for me to handle. Um, it is not only is it extremely challenging in a way that was extremely unique, um, but also I wasn't informed about it in advance. I didn't think anything about how the situation was set up and if it was fair to me, if it was um a situation that I should have been tackling even in my role in the way that I was. Um, Instead, what I said was, much like a young, I've been given this role. The expectation of everyone is that I am going to be able to solve the problem. That was the stress I put on myself immediately. I should be able to solve the problem. I typically solve all of the problems. In my last role, everyone came to me to solve problems. Yarbrah equals problem solver. I mean, even in our strength finders, I'm a restorative person, right? So like here's my strength. Here's what comes with the job. It's my responsibility to be able to handle this quickly. So that's another thing. In my mind, I needed to do it and I needed to do it quickly. I wasn't in a position to just like quit, or at least that's what I thought in that moment. Like I didn't that didn't even occur to me. It was, here is the situation. It's now my responsibility to solve it, even though I barely have anything left in the tank. That's the thing. I have nothing left in the tank. Doing this program with you, that fellowship for a year, was to learn and to fill the tank back up, right? There was no time to do that. I didn't think anything. But I am trying to fix it all because that's who I am, the fixer. That's the responsibility that I hold. And I don't know how to tell anyone, like, I don't think I could do this. One, it's too big. Two, in the structure of our program, the organization was so well thought of too. So I am seeing around like, my cohort mates, well, my other folks in the fellowship with me who think highly of the organization. In my mind, they think highly of me and this opportunity I've gotten in the organization. All of the hell is going on in the background. I can't really tell them because I'd be telling them about what's going on in the organization, and we exist in the same space. And I don't want people to know what's going on in the organization. And so it felt like having to hold a terrible secret. Um, Also feeling like I don't even know how to solve this problem and I have to keep it all to myself. And typically I'm okay with being able to do this. Um, but it but I wasn't. Holding all of that in and not being able to talk about it, or feeling like I didn't have an outlet to talk about it to anyone because I can no longer, again, talk to the other senior directors who normally we talk about everything. I am sitting with this heavy thing and then trying to show up. And what's interesting, Kristen, is going back, you could see the difference. But people I worked with in my job to the end were like, I don't know, you seemed fine to me. It was as it felt eventually I could see myself and was like, okay, girls, we are falling to pieces. But no one else could see that. It was like the mask that I had created was like Teflon, and like it was the image people had of me was that she always has it together. She will do it. It might be hard, but Yarbrah's gonna figure it out. Like that is the external presentation that I gave to people. And to be completely honest, I don't know if the other folks in the fellowship saw it. You saw it though. Definitely, yeah. Quite interestingly. Oh,
Yes.
and I let
And I asked you about it. And I will never forget that day. And you let me know, are you okay with me talking about it? Okay.
yeah,
All right. So I will never forget that day when I said, hey, like, I definitely have noticed something going on. And when I asked you about it, immediately your eyes got glazy. The tears started, showing up. And that's when I was like, okay, there is definitely something. There's a lot in there. Yeah.
yeah, yes. I think it was one, we've done some assessments, and I think that's where this started from. Like you were supposed to be talking to me about the assessment, and then you said, because I think initially you internalized it and thinking something was going on with
Well, you always have to ask that first. Like, okay, so let me make sure that she's okay with the program. Is it too much? Is it too much time? Like, you have to start there, right? Yeah.
right. But I think for me, it was just someone sees it. Like it was someone sees it. And the reality is it was spilling over for me. There was like, there was no ability to talk about it without talking about it, right? Like there was no ability to, okay, because at that point, I felt like I was going downhill fast, but it felt like no one else could see it but you. And I'm so grateful because one, it gave me someone to talk to about what was going on in a space of confidence. And like, and the folks in my cohort were amazing and supportive, and I know they would have supported me. At the time, though, it felt like from a responsibility standpoint, I couldn't talk about it because of the organization, and I didn't know how to talk about it and not talk about what I was experiencing from a work perspective. And so when I don't even remember the initial question, but whatever it was, it flowed out in such a way. And it was one of the first times where the reality is, and now I understand that I was like at such a low baseline, I couldn't pull on any of the tools I had. Like it was like I couldn't find the tools to kind of pull myself up in any way. Yarbrah of today would have been able to identify some solutions or some opportunities or something. But I had so little, and it felt like more and more was being compounded all the time. I didn't feel like I could get on top of it in any way.
And that's capacity. So when we talk about that, it's when you're at max capacity, I describe it as kind of like being thrown into the water and you're trying to tread water in the middle of the ocean. And then somebody's like, oh, Yarbrah, can you do a presentation for us? Right. It's like at a certain point, you have nothing else to give, but yet you are still trying to use the same tools that have always worked in the past. And you have no idea how to get to the next level. But a lot of times it's because you are at max capacity. And these are symptoms of not being in alignment with your current situation.
Right. And what I think is so important that I think I discovered, in our conversations and our coaching was that I never learned along the way when something was too much. I'd constantly throughout my life been pushed beyond capacity and done it. And so so I think back to in high school, I was in the International Baccalaureate program. It was a very challenging program. I was one of very few people of color in that program, and we dealt with a lot, like there's articles about it, like racism and all of these other things in that program. And a lot of people quit. And it just never occurred to me to quit. Like, we don't quit. I mean, that's what we don't quit. We get through the thing. And so I endured quite a bit to get through it, and I got through it, right? Like, I have a PhD. A lot of people don't get PhDs, and it's not because they're not smart, because that's not the issue. It is the endurance. And so, so much of, even today, even when I talked about intelligence and being smart, for me, I've always connected that to hard work and endurance more than gifted intelligence in any way.
Which is the craziest thing, Yarbrah, because you are, without a doubt, one of the most intelligent people that I have ever met. But for you, you attributed that to something different than intellect. It was hard work.
It was hard work. It was, I stay up a little later when other people won't. And if the group project, people aren't doing it, I do the other parts to get us through. Like, it has been in little ways like that, right? I am the person that will make sure the thing gets done. When other people are tired, I have a little bit more energy to go. I'll keep going to make sure the thing is done and it's done well. And so, to me, that has always felt more like fortitude and endurance and those kinds of things. And I've always felt like, okay, well, I have a little bit extra of that. Like, I see other people not having that, but I do. So because I have it, I'll push a little farther. I'll go a little bit harder. I'll do a little bit more. And so that is why, given the opportunity to move into the chief program officer role, I was exhausted already, right? I was exhausted. I was doing this program to prepare. So I had, earnestly applied to a program that was going to provide me a year's worth of training that I wanted to have before I went to even apply for a role like that, so that I could be ready and feel ready. Even though I knew that's what I wanted, that's the kind of setup I wanted, when asked to do it, I have almost always said yes, right? And I've almost always said yes. And I've often felt that the opportunity comes from saying yes. And so I walk into that, and because of that belief and because of previous experience, thinking, well, this will just be like those other times when I didn't feel like I had enough, and I'll make it enough until you can't. I learned that in that experience, like, eventually there is a wall you can't go beyond. Or if you do, you will have extreme physical consequences. Now, what I didn't, I already was having some of those.
Right. And let's talk about that, because we eventually started talking about you leaving the role. And then we got into after you left the role, right? So tell us a little bit about your decision and what went into that of deciding to leave.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I described myself, and one of the words was anxious, I probably always existed with a little bit of anxiety, even as a child. And no one around me, everybody expected me to get A's. It also wasn't extremely difficult for me. But the night before a report card, I could not sleep. I would have dreams about, what if I don't get A's? And, there's probably lots of depth to, like, what I thought that was going to mean about me and all of these other things. But, like, I remember existing always with just a little tiny bit of anxiety around certain things. So dealing with anxiety, I don't even know that I would have called it that, because I felt like, well, I've seen anxiety attack, and that's not me, right? So, like, this may be just as normal. So also internalizing, never getting any assistance or talking to anyone about it too much. And but what I started moving into was waking up panicked. And that's the only way I can describe it. I could go to sleep, thankfully, but I would wake up day to day like this. Like, it was always like the next thing that I have to do. What is the thing today that we have to solve? I remember being in, for those who have team software, and hearing the chime anytime somebody, or whatever that little sound is when someone is sending you a message. I remember holding my breath every time emails came in, because it felt like there was constantly another something to handle. And whereas in most of my life, issue would happen, I could solve it. The next issue could happen, I could solve it. It was kind of like feeling overwhelmed with things coming at me, and that now there are not enough hands to even be able to get to this. I'd also, had some personal health things and dealing with like fibroids and things like that. I'd had surgery, but I still was in kind of like an energy recovery from that. Women who've had it will probably understand.
I have had it, and I definitely understand. Yes.
Like was really low, and I was trying to get that back. So I also was like actually fatigued because I did not have, like, my body was still trying to build up the iron reserves and all of those things that give you oxygen and energy and all of those things. My blood pressure was already high, and I was on blood pressure medicine for the first time in my life. And I felt like I could feel myself with like tension headaches. And so these things are happening to me, and I'm like, my heart's racing fast. I'm waking up with this kind of, energy. And I remember there was a day, and I laugh about this now, but we were having a meeting, me and the other folks in the C-suite, and something else happened. And we're all on Zoom having this meeting. And I just remember closing my laptop in the middle of the meeting. I like literally just, while people were talking, I closed it. I went to the stairs in my house and I lost it. Like, it is the closest thing I think a panic attack or something, like the way that I grabbed my keys. I got in my car and I just started driving and was like, I'm going to go vote. We were voting for something here. I don't know why I decided this is what I need to do, but I was like, I got to get out of here. And I remember my friend called me. And so I parked. I'm sitting outside of the voting precinct. A friend called me on FaceTime, and she said, "What is going on?" And I looked at this was the beginning of me going, okay, this is, we're getting to the end. She said, "What is going on?" And I said, "Well, I'm about to go vote." She said, "You can't go in there looking like that." And I, in my car, took the little mirror down and looked at myself for the first time. And that is when I was like, oh, I am falling to pieces.
So what did you see? What did you see?
I just looked tired in a different kind of way. Like, I'd been tired, but I just looked, my eyes were no longer bright. I mean, by this point, most of us in pandemic, we're not wearing makeup every day. So it wasn't just that, but it was like, my eyes felt sunken in. I looked paler. Um, I just didn't look like myself. My hair was a bit disheveled. And I'm usually like a well put together person. People that know, like, I am.
Please, yes.
I care about being put together, and I didn't look that way. I think I had on a t-shirt, like, just looked like I'd probably just rolled out of bed, but I could look because that screen is so close to your face when you pull it down, and I just looked so tired. And she was like, "Well, you can't go in there looking like that." She was like, you. So then she talked to me, and I remember very shortly after that, I had a conversation with my dad about quitting for the first time, because I think, again, because endurance and hard work and prayer and that is what had been ingrained to me in my life. I'd never quit anything before. So, like, whereas was selective about what I did, that's true.
Right.
When I decided to do a thing, quitting was just not something I never entertained the notion of quitting. It was always, I will find a way to make it through to the end. But I could tell how I felt. I could look at myself and I was like, I have to consider not doing this anymore. I remember I had a therapist at the time. She and I were talking, but I also remember you and I having a conversation and you sharing a story about you making a decision to leave. And then you said something to me about not letting it get to the place where you didn't want to be there. And while I didn't have that feeling, I wasn't there. I was so afraid of being there. And I'm so grateful that you said that, because I'd never had ideation or anything like that. But that was on the other side.
Yep.
it was so clear to me that because I just felt useless
Mm.
because now that I'm, you know, and been in therapy longer, being useful was so much a part of my identity. And well, who am I if I can't solve the problem? What does it mean if this is what I've aspired to be and I can't do it well? Maybe that means I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe that means leadership isn't for me. Maybe that means this has been a farce. Maybe what this means is I've moved up in advance because I've been convenient or because I'm the person willing to do work more than anyone. I mean, like these are the kinds of things. And what happens if I don't have any more gas in the tank? And I went on vacation. I'm grateful that I went on my vacation. I think I talked to you and my therapist, and both of y'all were like, nope, you need to go on your vacation.
Yep.
Go. It was a terrible time to go on vacation. But I was like, I gotta go. I need a break. I need to leave. I went to Costa Rica with friends. It was amazing. I am so grateful that I was able to detach. Um, it was so interesting hearing other people because another thing that I think isn't talked about a lot with Black people, Black women, was the opportunity of leadership wasn't just the title, it was also the money. And it wasn't a life-changing money. Like, I know that today, but at the time, it was more than anyone in my family had ever made. And to look back, to feel like you have an opportunity to support others.
Mm.
It was enough for me to be able to do things not only for myself, but for other people I cared about. So was I working, in tech doing that? No, no. But like for those who work in nonprofit, like you grind, through certain salary levels and to get to a salary level where I was like, oh, this is what it feels like when you don't have to think about bills or things. Oh, I actually do this thing for my mom. Oh, I want to be able to do this thing for so and so. And like to be able to think about that also felt like I was disappointing people. I, because I'd got the opportunity and me saying no to it. I don't know. I felt a lot of responsibility to that, though I wasn't in it long enough to change anybody's life. I mean, but it also I wasn't thinking clearly. So, like in my mind, it was like I'm gonna give up what I could be doing for other people. Like, who am I to do that when Black people have had so few opportunities for leadership and so few opportunities to make decent salaries and be able to do things. And life has been so much harder for people 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like I need to push through. I mean, that was what I was telling myself. Like the ancestors pushed through, right? Like I owe it to us and a collective us to try to push through.
So it's that theme of responsibility, which is it's like you're drowning in responsibility. And then you're adding more and more and more responsibility that no one's even talked about with you, but you're adding it on to yourself that allows you to further drown in this concept and this overwhelming feeling of being responsible for everybody, but not putting yourself first in the middle of that.
Mm-mm. It wasn't. So doing it, I came back from Costa Rica on the plane, and I remember as we were descending, they come over the intercom or whatever, the pilot was like, "We're descending into Atlanta. You'll be, 30 minutes." And I felt like a weight got placed on my chest as soon as he said that. And as we descended, it felt like it got heavier and heavier. And I remember before I landed, I was on a flight with, all my friends who were coming from different places, but I was on a flight with two of my friends. And I think I said to them, and then I texted them and said, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit the job. And um, I felt better just saying it to myself. I shared it with I got home, I shared it with my family. By that point, they could tell things were not good with me, and they were like, "Okay, whatever you need, whatever you need to do, you need to do it." And I remember making a call 8 a.m. that month. I mean, it was 8 o'clock. I dialed the number to share with the CEO that I was resigning, and her response was no. And I wasn't expecting that. Like, I had not replayed that. That was not what had gone on in my mind, at all, was that there was a no, or there was a, do you want to take a month off? I mean, there was a real effort to try to figure out a way for me to make it work there. And I was like, I have a doctor's appointment this week. I know it's not going to be good. And I just, and can you wait until after that? Can you, and see what you need? Maybe you just need a month off, and maybe we can do that for you, and then you can come back. Or do you want to consult? Is there some other way? I went to the doctor that week, and the doctor said to me, I'm not sure what's going on, but you're going to have to make some changes real soon. And I shared what I was dealing with, and I was like, talking about what I was feeling with the anxiety. And she said, I can't tell you to quit your job. She was like, that's not something that I can tell you to do. She said, but you're gonna have to make some changes really quickly, because you're not gonna be able to continue this way. And that was it for me. Because again, on the other side of that, I saw, and I think a lot of people have seen it. I've seen Black women in leadership dying. Just dying. And not just dying, but then the world moves right along right after that. And it was, I was like, that's going to be me, because I don't know how to remove myself from this. So I'm going to do it. And so I said, I went back to to the CEO, and I said, I'm going to resign. I'm going to resign. And still one of the hardest, it felt like I got fired. And people think that sounds so weird to people, but I literally would talk about it like I got let go, not that I made the choice. It felt shameful to me. And I don't know how to do it, because it felt like I didn't measure up. It felt like I was running away, or I was abandoning my people, right? Like, that's what I felt like. My team, the org, the students that we were serving, it felt like I was letting down hundreds of thousands of people. That is what I took away from it. And so, like, I processed it. And I used to, when I would talk about it, I'd be like, yeah, because when I lost my job, and then people would be like, you didn't lose your job. You left your job. You made a choice. And I had a friend who said, you keep talking about all the people that you think you let down. She said, but you never talk about how you picked yourself. And I just didn't. I did not process it that. It sounds ridiculous, but I didn't process it that way at all. And the reason that we were actually having this conversation is because in conversation with her and with other people, people tell me how much that meant to them. To see me walk away from that experience, because it made them think about what they were sacrificing for themselves, and that it was even an option for us to choose ourselves. And
it's huge. Like that, it is huge, because I relate to this in so much. And I'm sure that I shared this story with you, that when I was making one decision to leave, the thing you start thinking about, the thing that keeps you there much longer than the expiration date, right? Is that you always think about other people. You always think about, well, what's so-and-so going to do? And what's so-and-so going to do? And I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And finally you get to a place where you have to, like, where it's a snap. It's like something just moves into place, and it's just like, I'm going to choose me. And I'm sure everybody has different reasons. Yours medical, and but it was so clear for me that was going to be my choice. And then I had to say to myself, someone else, like, they're gonna figure it out. They're gonna figure it out. Just like when someone calls to ask for money, to borrow money, and you can't lend it to them, they will figure it out.
I remember you saying that to me, and I felt like, I don't know how. Because again, it's the brain, the energy that I have at that moment, um, that I'm like, I don't know how. I worked 3 more weeks, and I don't know where I got the energy in the 3 weeks that I gave them to leave transition reports, to talk to people, to, "Here's my suggestion on how to do this." Here, I'm trying to set everyone up for success because I felt so guilty. I don't know how to describe that, for leaving. Um, and that is likely some abandonment wounds and some other things and all of the, other stuff with my life. But I felt like I was leaving them. And I rarely, maybe never have done that in my life. I usually figure it out for people. I figure it out for myself and I figure it out for other people. And it felt like I couldn't do it. And then I was walking away and I knew it still needed to be done. And so there was guilt that took, continued coaching from you and therapy, to like rewire how I thought about that thing, to even look at it from the very beginning, that like the opportunity was presented to me and I didn't know the full story. Like, none of the story was I told myself was about how I was not treated the best in that entire experience, or how the experience in and of itself was not fair, and not just to me, but to everybody, right? Like I didn't, um, in an effort to probably never even consider myself a victim in most things, it was, here's the circumstances, rather than cry about them, how do we fix it? I mean, and that is often how I had just like experienced most of my life. And so leaving, um, felt like letting people down, right, rather than lifting myself up initially. I am grateful that even though I felt that way, I still did it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am grateful. I think I thought that was the end of the story. I was like, and I have done the big thing. This was the big adult decision, and my time off will now be the preparing myself for the next big thing. I didn't.
Yes. Yes, you did. You definitely did. And I will remember saying to, like, you called, we talked, and you were like, "Okay, so I am going to, okay, so I'm going to apply for 5 jobs tomorrow. I'm gonna get my apps. I'm gonna," and what did I say to you? Do you remember?
You were like, You're not going to be able to do any of that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Because I told you, not just job, Kristen, I was also going to get in the best physical shape of my life. This was also happening. And I had been to Peloton, and I was going to be doing this walking, and I was going to lose this weight. And I was doing that. I was also like going to be like doing all of this work. And then you said to me, like you don't, that's too much. And you need to think about your day and this and that. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I will watch a couple of Netflix things. And also do these, like, because I am getting myself together, because what's next for me is clearly bigger and better than this. That's what, right? Like that's the story. The way this story ends is that this thing didn't work out and this bigger, better thing is on the other end. So I need to be ready for the bigger, better thing. And you were like, you need to think about what is one thing you can do. You're saying this to me and me being like, this is ridiculous. What is Kristen talking about? Why she clearly doesn't know. He organized a plan, because that's me, about how we're going to take this time off. And it's going to be like 3 months. And maybe I'll give myself a week or 2 before I jump in it. I'm going to jump back in this thing. And then the bigger or better thing, by the time we are out of this summer, the bigger or better thing And boy, were you right.
Well, because we had to talk about grief, right? There's the grief in saying goodbye. There's the grief in losing a community. There's the grief in sitting still for the first time in your life.
Oh my goodness. I I've never sat still. You asked me a question somewhere along our coaching journey about how did my mother model rest? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
It is a question that I asked my friends. Um and I was like, model rest. And I thought about it and I could find one window of rest that I saw my mother have, and it was after church, after preparation of dinner, on a Sunday. That was my rest. What do you mean rest? And it was really like a then I'm talking to my other friend. There was no rest. We weren't taught to rest in our faith. We were taught to be dutiful and to give back and to serve. I wasn't taught rest in my sorority. Service is a key component of what we do. And I remember telling you this. I was like, when I had my little presentation show, my little Delta Prep back in 2003, I talked about being a hard worker in it because it was my brand. TM, Yarbrah hard worker TM. I mean, like that's who I was. So the notion of like a rest for me felt like, okay, 2 weeks. Check. My body, I was like, I'm gonna get a massage. Look, I had come up with a massage and all of these other things. And my body didn't know how to restart. I tell people I didn't work. I got a new role. I couldn't look for a job for 3 months. I couldn't even look. Once I started looking, I actually got a new role pretty quickly. But I didn't work a total of like 6.5 months. One, never thought that was ever possible. Never, ever thought that was ever possible. But even before then, I thought that when someone tells you they did not work for almost 7 months, you would think that they have seen everything on Netflix. Or they've read the books, or they've done the things. And I am here to tell you, I don't know that I finished one series of anything on Netflix. I don't know what I did for 3 months. I don't even know how to describe. I know that the thing I could commit to was taking a bath or shower and eating something at least once.
Yeah, because your nervous system for all these years since you were a kid has been go, 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 solve problems, solve everyone's problems, disconnect from my body, and just make sure that I am responsible for everybody else. And you finally got to a place where you were responsible for you. And your nervous system has to reset to figure that out. The grief on top of that has to, there's so many complexities that have to occur when you quit a job that people just don't ever think about. What's it like for you to not have anything on your calendar? No one is texting, no one is calling. It is just you.
You and your thoughts.
Yes. Yeah, so as we close this out, Yarbrah, let's just spend the next minute just talking about your advice for other people and what you learned in your journey.
Yeah. The first thing I would have to say, I want to be able to tell you to listen to your body, because it is something I think about and do now so much more. But I was also so disconnected from my body at that point, and I had ignored my body for so long that was like my default setting. And so what I would say is identify the people that see you, because I think those are the people that will save your life. If you can't see you, And sometimes it's not who you think, right? So, like, again, my friend that saw me that day, she saw me, right? But I was working 10-hour days with people who I believe cared about me in this job that I was willing to sacrifice everything for, and none of them could see it. But Kristen, who I would see once per month, right, for a few hours in a group, could see it. And I think you have to learn to listen to people who are saying things to you from a place of caring, even if it's not the things you want to hear. Um, that's one. Two, I think we have to learn, and it's important to know exactly what you said, which is they'll figure it out. I think in having a strength in responsibility, or the burden of responsibility, however you want to look at it, you feel too important to other people, more than you should. Um, y- you believe yourself to be more important than you even are. You are important, because it's like you come organize your work in the relationships in the community in that way. But the reality is that all of this stuff will exist without you. And the question is, will it exist if you choose to go, or will it exist if you just go? And I think thinking about the severity of that your life could end because of the stress you're putting yourself into, I don't think we do enough, because we exist with stress for so long, that we don't ever consider how bad it could get. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Yarbrah, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Plastic Couch podcast and for courageously telling your story. When we started this, you were like, listen, I will talk about it all. And I want to thank you, because you don't know the door that you just opened up for so many people, women of color, and specifically Black women, who have always been the responsible, strong friend, where no one is checking for them, but they are the ones that are drowning in responsibility and solving other people's problems and not making themselves the center of anything. And so thank you for making this choice to choose you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the platform. But more than that, also thank you for seeing me now almost 3 years ago. It was around this time, right? When I was having these conversations with you, this would have still been before I'd made the decision. Even though I know you knew that was a decision I needed to make, you never said that. But I appreciate you for so much, because I the purpose of that experience was to get me to the C-suite. And like, maybe it will one day. Like, maybe I'll come to you some years from now. We'll have another conversation about how that shows back up. But going through that experience, I know saved my life and made me better for myself as I move forward in my life. So thank you for that too.
Oh, you are so welcome. You are so welcome. My job is never about just the position. It's about helping you take care of your full self. And if I have done that, I have done my job.
Yes. Yes, you have. So thank you.
Okay. So, Yarbrah, thank you for being a guest on the Plastic Couch podcast. We are sending you lots of love. And thanks for everybody for listening to Yarbrah's journey.